Some nights in Arthur's court are remembered for glory, others for tragedy. But every now and then there's one whose story feels like a flickering flame, burning bright, vanishing suddenly, only to blaze again when no one expects it. Yvain was one of those knights. He wasn't the loudest in court, not the boldest. But those who paid attention knew there was something in him, something patient, calculating, and quietly unshakable. He was one of King Arthur's knights, loyal and skilled, but for a time his name faded from the feasting halls and whispered tales. No songs, no sightings, just silence. People said he vanished after a duel, that he left a battlefield soaked in magic and death and simply never returned. Some thought him dead. Others figured he wandered off, lost to his own pride, but no one could say for certain. Until one day they could. His name came back into the world not with the horn of trumpets or the beating of drums, but through rumor. A tale of a knight wandering mad, of a lion by his side, and of a woman once called the Lady of the Fountain. This isn't a story about glory earned in a single battle. It's about falling apart and putting yourself back together. About love, loyalty, and a creature that should have been his enemy, becoming his closest friend. And so begins the story of Yvain, the Knight of the Lion, one of the most famous French Arthurian romances, a tale that vanishes, fractures, and somehow still returns stronger than before. Before he was ever called the Knight of the Lion, before he ever stood in the shadow of the enchanted fountain, Yvain was simply another noble son in Arthur's court, capable, composed, and often overlooked in the chaos of more boisterous knights. He was the son of King Urien of Gore and Morgan Le Fay, though he didn't go around boasting about it. That bloodline carried weight, sure, but Yvain wore it lightly. He didn't need to shout his name to prove his worth. He did it with action, with skill, with a kind of quiet confidence that made other knights respect him, even if they didn't always notice him first. He had a strong, well-cut frame, lean rather than bulky, built for speed and endurance. His hair was dark, kept just long enough to fall across his brow, and his eyes were a stormy gray-blue, calm, sharp, and always watching. He wasn't flashy in his armor or his words. What set him apart was how he moved, purposeful, like every step already knew where it was going. Yvain was a thinker, but not in the way that made him hesitate. He could read a room, size up a threat, and act faster than most who shouted louder. He had a talent for combat, especially in duels. Not just strength and swordplay, but precision. He didn't waste energy. Every strike was measured. Every parry had a reason. But what really made Yvain dangerous wasn't his sword. It was that he didn't fight for fame. He fought for something quieter. Honor. Or maybe just to prove, mostly to himself, that he belonged in a world shaped by great men and legends. That he wasn't just a footnote in someone else's glory. At court, he was respected. He had friends. But he wasn't the center of attention like Gawain or Lancelot. Not yet. He moved in the shadows of their renown, listening, waiting for a moment to carve out a place of his own. That moment came, as it often does in Arthurian legend, with a challenge. A strange tale, a fountain, a storm, and the chance to step out of the background and into a legend of his own. It began not with a boast, but with a confession. Sir Calogrenant, one of Arthur's noble knights and cousin to Yvain, stood before the court with shame written across his face. He told a story that none had heard before, one of failure, of defeat, of a place hidden deep in a shadowed wood where a strange fountain lay in silence. He spoke of a silver basin resting atop a stone beside the waters, of a ritual, drawing water from the bowl and pouring it on the stone, that summoned not just a storm, but something worse. When he had tried it, the sky split open in a sudden fury. Lightning, thunder, wind, hail, each hammering the forest like judgment from the heavens. And when the storm cleared, a knight appeared, darkly armored, wordless, furious. Sir Calogrenant had tried to stand his ground, but the knight had overwhelmed him. defeated him cleanly, shamed him, then spared his life. And Calogrenant had fled, wounded more in pride than in flesh. The court listened in stunned silence. Even Kay, so often ready with a cruel quip, held his tongue. But Yvain felt something else stir. Not pity, not shame, but resolve. This was family, and in Camelot, that meant everything. So Yvain rose, calm, composed, but certain. He said nothing cruel, no grand claims of vengeance, only that he would ride out to the fountain, that he would answer what his cousin could not, and that the knight who shamed Calogrenant would not walk away a second time. Arthur gave a nod, half warning, half blessing. Calogrenant tried to dissuade him, but Yvain was already leaving, already calling for his horse. The time for stories was done. The journey took days. The woods grew darker, thicker, quieter the farther he traveled. Locals offered vague warnings but no direction. Still, Yvain found the place. He had to. The fountain sat hidden in a lonely glade, untouched by wind. The stone and bowl were just as Calogrenant had said, unremarkable, but strangely expectant, as if waiting for someone foolish or brave enough to disturb them. Yvain stepped forward, drew water from the basin, poured it slowly on the stone. The sky tore open, thunder cracked, hail fell like daggers. The trees groaned under the sudden weight of wind and rain. The storm came fast, violent, and without warning, unnatural, as if the forest itself had screamed. And then, through the chaos, came a sound that was all too human. A knight appeared, just as Calogrenant had said, armor dark and polished, visor down, lance ready. He didn't speak, didn't slow, he simply charged. And Yvain, sword drawn, shield raised, met him head on. The clash was instant. No time for words, no salutes or measured circling, just steel on steel, and two horses thundering into one another in the heart of a storm-soaked glade. Yvain felt the shock of the first blow rattle through his bones, but he held, countered, drove forward. This wasn't just a test of skill, it was personal. The knight, Esclados, though Yvain didn't yet know the name, fought like one born to the blade. His strikes were disciplined, precise. Each blow followed the last without pause. This wasn't some wild challenger. This was a man with a purpose, a protector. But Yvain had purpose too. He matched the knight step for step, blade for blade, refusing to give an inch. The rain slicked their armor, mud tugged at their boots, but neither gave in. Back and forth they went, across the clearing, through the trees, the sounds of battle swallowed by the lingering storm. Then came the mistake, a brief misstep, maybe from fatigue, maybe from a brief flicker of doubt. Whatever it was, Esclados faltered. And Yvain saw it. He lunged, his blade slipped between the plates beneath Esclados' right arm, deep, clean, final. The knight staggered, breath caught in his throat, eyes locked on Yvain's. No hatred, no fury, just quiet realization. And then he fell, his body crumpling near the very fountain he had sworn to defend. The forest stilled, the storm faded. Yvain stood over the fallen knight, chest heaving, soaked to the skin. He didn't feel triumph, only weight, the kind that settled in your bones before the truth ever reached your ears. Because the truth was already coming. A line of servants and guards poured from the castle hidden just beyond the trees, rushing to the fallen knight. Yvain lowered his sword, confused, until he heard someone cry the name. Esclados the Red, not just the guardian of the fountain, but its lord, and husband to the Lady Laudine. Yvain hadn't just won a duel, he had killed a king, changing his life forever. Yvain had expected resistance, rage, maybe even his own death. What he didn't expect was her. Lady Laudine stood in the hall of the castle, pale as the mists that clung to her woods, draped in mourning black. Her beauty struck him first, not the glamour of court, but something quieter, colder, like moonlight on stone. She was poised, unreadable, and entirely alone. This was the widow of Esclados the Red, the man Yvain had just killed. And yet, when she looked at him, something changed. Not in her expression, but in the air itself, like a thread had been plucked that neither of them could ignore. He didn't mean to fall in love with her, not like this. But love doesn't care for timing, or guilt, or blood on your hands. Still, Yvain was no fool. He knew her grief was raw. Her court filled with suspicion. Servants and nobles whispered, who was this outsider? Why had he come? And why now did he linger? Then came Lunette, a lady in waiting, sharp-tongued, clever, loyal beyond reason to her mistress. She saw something in Yvain, maybe guilt, maybe potential, and where others saw a murderer, she saw a path. It was Lunette who spoke on his behalf. It was Lunette who convinced Laudine that perhaps the man who took her husband could also protect what he left behind. And it was Lunette who brokered the strangest, most sudden proposal Camelot would ever whisper about. Yvain asked for Laudine's hand, not out of conquest, not out of political gain, but something deeper, a need to right a wrong he couldn't undo. And to everyone's surprise, she said yes. A marriage followed, quick, quiet, and veiled in tension. Some called it madness, others strategy. But for Yvain and Laudine, it was something else entirely. Yvain loved her, he truly did. But love born from death is a complicated thing, and nothing built on guilt stays steady forever. Hey everyone, just a quick intermission here. I wanted to say thank you for watching this video. It really means a lot to me. Did you know that over 80% of you who are watching right now aren't subscribed to the channel? If you've enjoyed this content so far, it would be incredible if you could hit that subscribe button. It's a small gesture, but it really helps the channel grow and ensures that you won't miss any more of our fascinating stories we explore together. Also, if you're feeling generous, please give this video a thumbs up, leave a comment, and share with anyone else who may enjoy it. Your support really does make a difference and keeps the content coming. Thanks again, and let's get back to the story. For a while it worked. Yvain, once a wandering knight with no greater aim than glory, settled into life beside Lady Laudine. He ruled her lands with fairness, protected the fountain with the same strength that once challenged it, and really tried to be the man she needed him to be. But Camelot never stays silent for long. One day, a knight from King Arthur's court arrived. A tournament had been called. Champions from every corner of the realm would be gathering, and Arthur expected his best. Gawain had been asking after Yvain, so had others, and to no one's surprise, the king himself wanted his knight to return, if only for a time. Yvain hesitated. He glanced toward Laudine, then back at the invitation. He told himself it would only be for a short while, just long enough to remind the world who he was. A few weeks, no more. Laudine agreed, but only with one condition. He must return before the full year passed. A single year. That was the vow. Yvain swore it, and he meant it. But pride is a slippery thing, and time doesn't always pass the way you think it will. One tournament became two. One skirmish turned into another. Everywhere he went, his name rang louder, his victories stacked higher, and the cheers of the court grew sweeter. He lost track, not on purpose, but he lost track all the same. And when the final day of his vow passed, it was too late. Laudine sent no messenger, no warning, only Lunette. She found him mid-celebration, armor still stained from battle, smile still fresh from victory, and delivered her mistress's words with ice in her voice. She told him that he broke his word to Laudine, and because of that, she no longer wanted Yvain in her life. Just like that, everything cracked. Laudine's love turned cold. The door to her heart and her castle was shut. Yvain was no longer a husband, no longer a lord, no longer anything. Guilt wrapped around his chest like chainmail, and this time, no sword could cut him free. When the door closed behind him, when Laudine cast him out without rage, without tears, just silence, Yvain didn't return to Camelot. He didn't head back to court or even to the tournament grounds. He vanished. There are no grand tales for this stretch of his life, no glorious battles, no dragon slaying, just a man crumbling under the weight of his own failure. He shed his armor, let his sword rust in its sheath, and wandered the woods like a ghost with skin. No fire, no purpose, just regret. Every step seemed to carry the echo of Laudine's voice, not in anger, but in disappointment. And that somehow was worse. Some say he tore at his own hair and clothes, muttering to trees and rivers. Others whisper he slept beneath thorn bushes and rain, eyes open but unseeing, forgetting even his name. This wasn't a punishment from any sorcerer, no curse from the Lady of the Lake or Morgana. It was entirely his own doing. A noble knight, once polished and praised, now feared by travelers who glimpsed his shadow in the trees. Madman, wild man, lost soul. Time slipped by in tatters. Days bled into months, and the man he once was faded further. And yet, even in this lowest place, something stirred. Not a voice, not a vision, a presence. One day, through tangled undergrowth and half-forgotten dreams, he found himself watching a lion, trapped in a clearing, a serpent coiled around it, hissing, ready to strike. Yvain had no sword, no shield, but something, whatever was left of his honor, snapped back into place. He leapt into the fight. With bare hands and broken focus, he tore the serpent from the lion and crushed it against the rocks. The lion lived, and it followed him. Wherever he went after that, the lion walked at his side. No chains, no command. Just a quiet, unwavering loyalty, as though it knew, deep down, that this man needed saving too. And Yvain began to remember who he was. The lion didn't speak. It didn't guide him with words or visions, but it was there, solid and certain, when the rest of the world still felt like mist. It didn't flinch at his silence, didn't judge the mess he'd become, it just stayed. And that was enough to start putting the pieces back together. Bit by bit, Yvain began to remember what it felt like to stand upright, to move with purpose. He cleaned his armor, sharpened his sword, ate regularly, slept without nightmares clawing at the edges of his dreams. The madness that had once hollowed him out started to loosen its grip, and with it came the will to do good again. He didn't rush back to Camelot, didn't head straight for Laudine's gates, begging for forgiveness. Instead, he wandered, but this time, not aimlessly. Wherever he went, he watched for those in need. Bandits, monsters, cursed knights. He stood against them all, not for reward, not to build his name back up, just because it was the right thing to do. And the lion, always beside him, became a symbol. People began to talk of a knight in dulled armor, walking with a great beast at his heel, bringing justice without titles or fanfare. He saved a damsel from a traitorous steward. He defended a noblewoman wronged by a lord. He broke a siege, bested enchanted warriors, and still, he never gave his name. Just a man and a lion mending what they could. And somewhere in the doing, Yvain found himself again. Not the courtly champion, not the flawless hero, but a knight who had seen the bottom of the pit and crawled out on his own terms. He wasn't whole yet, but he was no longer broken. By now, tales of the nameless knight and his lion companion were traveling faster than Yvain himself. People whispered them in castles, villages, even the darkest parts of the wood. Some called him cursed, others called him blessed, but most just called him the knight who helped and vanished. He didn't plan to chase legend, but legend, as it turns out, has a way of finding you. In one land, Yvain came across a castle besieged by two giants. Towering brutes, wrapped in furs and wielding tree-trunk clubs, had claimed the surrounding hills and demanded tribute from the people below. Grain, gold, even daughters. No knight had yet dared challenge them, but Yvain did. With the lion at his side, he charged straight into their camp at dusk. The fight was brutal. The ground shook beneath each swing of their weapons. Yvain dodged the first giant's blow and drove his blade deep into the second's thigh. The lion leapt for the throat. Together they moved as one, silent, deadly, precise. And when the dust settled, both giants lay dead, their hulking forms still warm on the blood-soaked earth. But not all dangers were made of flesh. Further along his journey, Yvain found himself in a strange land, caught in a place ruled by sorcery. The very air felt wrong, thick, heavy, humming with enchantment. There he met a damsel trapped in a strange prison, bound by a cruel enchantress who had sealed the gates with magic and riddles. Yvain faced illusions, false enemies conjured from shadow, and walls that shifted while he slept. But he pushed through it all, guided by instinct, and by the lion who seemed to sense what was real and what wasn't. With patience and strength, he broke the spell, freed the damsel, and left behind a castle now emptied of its old curse. These trials didn't just test his blade, they tested his resolve, his patience, and the man he was becoming. Each challenge tempered the chaos still flickering in his soul. Each step drew him closer to the heart of what he'd left behind, closer to Laudine, and she would be the hardest trial of all. Time moves strangely when you're wandering, slower in the woods, faster in your thoughts. And though Yvain had fought giants, broken spells, and walked the edge of madness, there was one thing he hadn't yet faced. Her. Laudine, the Lady of the Fountain. He had once left her with a kiss and a promise, thinking he'd return as a hero. Instead, he'd vanished like a ghost. And now, after everything, he was just a man hoping she'd listen. He didn't return in shining armor. He didn't come with trumpets or fanfare. Just quiet steps and a heart full of everything he couldn't say. When he arrived at the fountain, she wasn't there. But her maid was, Lunette. The clever woman who had once helped forge their union, and who had nearly been condemned for it. She looked him over with eyes sharp as ever. No warmth, not at first. Only silence and a raised brow. And then, finally, a nod. Laudine agreed to hear him. What passed between them in that chamber is told 100 different ways. Some say he knelt and wept. Others say he barely spoke a word. But what matters is this. He didn't beg. He didn't try to twist her heart or charm his way back. He told the truth. Told her of his failure, his shame, the madness, the lion, the slow crawl back toward becoming someone who deserved her. And somehow in all that mess, Laudine saw the man she had once loved. Not the same, but maybe something better. She forgave him. Not easily, not fully, but enough to let him stay. Enough to begin again. And so the Night of the Lion returned, not as a tale of glory, but as one of growth. A reminder that even heroes break, and sometimes the greatest battles are fought not with swords, but with the weight of who we've been, and who we're still trying to become.